Well, it's great to be here. Being compared to Gutenberg is kind of unusual. In a way, it's too generous because certainly there are hundreds and hundreds of people who have been involved with me in being pioneers of bringing on the computer age that we have today. In a way, though, I hope it's not generous enough. I mean, certainly Gutenberg died before he'd spread his invention to millions of people, and I don't think he ever made much money on it, so I hope we can do better than that. I want to talk a little bit today about a couple things, about the company and how we run the company, and also a little bit about information technology and how it's changing the world that all of us are going to work with in the future. And I think it's changing in a way that's very informative on what skills we ought to learn and a very positive impact we're going to have. We had this panel about the future, and it was interesting. There was a guy there who was from the Club of Rome, and I'm sure he's a great person, but I disagreed totally with everything he said about the future. So you will find, I'll admit right up front, that I'm very optimistic. Now, I started my fascination with computers at quite a young age. I was 13 years old, and classes in some ways didn't seem that interesting. I mean, you'd sit there, and if you were confused, they didn't stop and explain stuff to you. If you'd figured it all out, they wouldn't let you leave the room early. It just didn't seem like a very interactive process. In fact, I interrupted enough in my math classes that they excused me from sitting in those altogether because I had sort of cheated and read ahead by a couple years worth of what they were teaching. And so I had a lot of spare time sitting down at this computer room. And computers were very expensive back then. The notion that an individual would own one was very far-fetched. What we had was a computer line connected to a big, expensive computer. And I went to a private school, very nice private school, and the Mothers Club, who I think they sold rummage or old clothes or something, had given $3,000 for the students to connect up to this GE computer and use this language called BASIC. And little did they know that $3,000 was not very much money. And the teachers came down and tried to learn this thing and got really confused by it. And so they accidentally told us, well, why don't you try and figure it out? Well, next thing we knew, we were trying it, and it was so much fun. And we were completely addicted. I mean, this was great, but we used up the $3,000. And so a lot of my early business instinct was to deal with either getting free computer time or making enough money so I could go buy computer time and play around and learn more of these things. And so very quickly, after that money was used, some friends and I started a little company and went around to sell our services and got the idea that we really knew something about computers and that we could do a lot of software programming. In fact, we got paid $5,000 a year, which for high school students wasn't that bad, and actually got the job of making the schedules for the school that we went to. It's a very powerful position. You get to decide what courses people are in. This is a school that only had 20% women, and somehow every class I was in, I was the only male student in the class. We made good money doing that, and we learned a lot. I mean, we were young and naive. We were sort of overambitious. We had some things we did that didn't work out very well. But when you're young, you can just go back to school and learn from that. And actually, the person that I founded Microsoft with was a student at that time. His name is Paul Allen. He's a very good person. But we had a project where he was in charge. And he decided he was going to run it a certain way. And I said, no, I don't think this will work. was actually writing a payroll program. And so that didn't work out. And so eventually he called me up and he said, hey, you got to help me out with this thing. And I said, okay, that's fine. But if you take up my offer here, from now on, I'm going to manage whatever we do. And he said, okay, fine. And that's the way we worked thereafter. And he, as the co-founder, his idea, his vision was very instrumental. But we decided we were specialized. And in a sense, that pushed me towards really thinking about management, really thinking about leadership, how to run a company. These are very deep topics. I like science, I like physics, I read about the advances in math, a great deal. Financing a lot of research on the human genome because I think the sequencing of the human genome, other than advances in information technology, that's the field that's going to change the world more than any other. To understand disease, to understand learning, to understand intelligence, it's very deep stuff, but not as deep as changing communication with information technology. So in any case, even from those early days, I very consciously sought out people who I saw that were managing things very well and would ask them a lot of questions. And when you're young, you have this incredible advantage that people are willing to share their ideas and talk to you about what you should do right. And I certainly took full advantage of that. During this time, unbeknownst to me, Paul and I were getting quite a reputation for being computer people. And so when this big company, DEC, had a project that was in deep, deep trouble, where they were supposed to computerize the power grid in the United States, and they committed to this aggressive schedule and aggressive reliability, and it was completely unrealistic. So they were like 6 months behind schedule, paying $10,000 a month. They said, oh, we've got to fix this problem. We've got to get this thing shipped. And one of the best developers said, well, we could call up Gates and Allen. Well, they'd never met us. They'd just heard of us. And they said, well, so the management said, who are they? We've got to get them. We were losing a lot of money here. If these people can help, definitely let's hire them. And so the guy said, well, maybe I can find them. They do know this particular system, computer system, better than other people. And so a few weeks later, we showed up. I was 16 years old at the time. And they were kind of like, wait a minute, where's the adult here? But they hired us. And actually working on that project, which was so mismanaged, it was unbelievable, was a great experience. I have to say that in terms of learning, you learn more by being part of a failure. Not just yourself necessarily, but being part of a group that doesn't do things right than you necessarily do with success. A lot of the best people we've hired as a company are people who worked very hard and were in a company that failed and actually understand there are real trade-offs to be made, real choices. Business isn't just about ideas. It's about priorities. It's about focus. It's about doing things differently or more aggressively than other people do. And so during that project, I worked very hard. We eventually got the thing shipped. We eventually got them to pay us a reasonable salary. And it was quite a learning experience. Now at that time, my personal instinct was to start a company. I just was sort of getting into this management thing. I wanted to try it. But my parents convinced me that I should go to school, go to the university, and some other friends convinced me that I should work on a PhD in computer science. So I went to the one school that actually agreed I could work on both a PhD and my undergraduate degree at the same time, which was back in Boston, Harvard University. And that was a good experience. I mean, growing up is helpful. I think I matured a little bit. I didn't learn much about business for a couple of years there. But what happened was that Paul Allen moved back to Boston to be there and sort of stimulate some thinking about computers and where they would go. And we saw the very first computer on a chip which is, it's just a breakthrough technology. It's an amazing technology. I mean, every 2 years, these things get twice as fast. And that kind of exponential improvement is just so different than anything else we deal with. You know, the analogies are that, you know, a car would get 1 million miles to the gallon if this had been true for improving in like this for the last 20 years. And you know, they'd cost less than a penny to buy a car. And so the easiest way to think of this kind of advance is to think of computing being free. That is, you have infinite computation. Any idea you can come up with that requires computation, we can do it. You might have to wait a few years till the machine's fast enough, but that is a closer model of what this means than anything else. Now, when we saw this microprocessor, we said, my God, the computer industry will never be the same. And so we looked around and we thought, oh, IBM, they must know this, and DEC and HP, and they must be doing something about this. Well, they had a lot of organizational inertia. And the thing, this computer on a chip wasn't very powerful. Actually, the first thing we did with it was take the controllers in elevators where they always go to the wrong floor. They're not very intelligent. And we showed Otis how they could build an elevator that would actually go to the optimal floor. It's a great mathematical problem that we worked on. And the computer was just barely good enough to do that. But we thought, why aren't these other companies seeing this? This is such an amazing thing, that these computers will be so fast. Even the company that invented the chip, Intel, which is a wonderful company, was still thinking of it as something for adding machines and little controllers here or there, maybe in a traffic light or something. And so Paul and I were shaking our heads, and we thought, it's time really to start a company. And after I'd been in school for 3 years, on the cover of a magazine, Popular Electronics, there was a kit computer. When I say kit, I mean a bunch of parts that you have to solder together. And this computer was really pathetic. After you soldered it together, the only thing you could do with it was key in programs little switches, and then there were little lights that you could see. They would light up in a certain way. There was no keyboard, no way to type, no storage, none of the things that we're used to today. But we saw that computer and we felt so bad that we were missing this revolution that we'd been talking about, staying up late at night for a long time, that I decided, hey, I'm going to drop out of school and we're going to write software for this thing. And that's what we did, and that was the very genesis of the company. Now, in terms of a company, Microsoft has gone through many stages. In a way, it's a lot of fun, but believe me, it's very different. What I thought about and what was important in terms of doing well in those first few years is very different, largely, than my role in the company today. And although we had this great vision we wrote down, a computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software, we still thought we'd always be a very, very small company. If you'd asked me at any time during the history of the company, would we double in size, I would have said, yeah, maybe, and that'll be it. We'll never get bigger than that. So when we had 20 people, I thought, yeah, 40, I could handle that. When we had 40, I thought, okay, 80. We'll have to get some new office space, squeeze people a little bit, but that's going to be it. You know, today we're at 16,000 people. And I'll tell you honestly, we might need twice as many people, but I guarantee you we won't need any more than that. And this time, I think I'm right this time. So it wasn't a question of saying, oh, well, we're going to be so successful, let's you know, skip all the steps in the middle and just, you know, be a big company. It was, you know, kind of a day at a time. And first, when you start a company, there's some things that are easy. During your life, you've met a few smart people, and you hire your friends to come to work for you. That's good in a way because you know them. It's also, in terms of managing people you know well like that, it's a fairly tricky thing. Most of my best friends work for the company, and you know, that's worked super well for me, but it's something that requires special thinking to have both elements of the relationship. That is, being able to tell something they're doing an absolutely horrible job, and you're still their friend. And so in the early days, it was all individual contribution. I looked at every piece of code that was written. I interviewed every person. We had a very flat structure. Until we had 20 people, everybody worked for me directly, essentially. I hadn't read any management textbooks or anything. And it was fine. I mean, for a certain size company, one very energetic person can do a lot of things. I wrote the payroll checks. I worked on the contracts. And I didn't believe in hiring non-developers. I had this sort of notion that we should be all engineers. Maybe we'll have one secretary, but we're just going to be engineers. Today, Microsoft has about 10% of our staff are engineers. And although they're a very important 10%, I have to say that a lot of our competitive excellence comes from understanding the other elements of the business. So this is something I had to grow out of. In fact, when the company got fairly big, when we got up to, I think it was 1,500 people, I still had this view, what I called the hierarchy of intelligence, that you should never have to work for anybody who didn't know more than you knew. That's right. And so it was impossible to think that an engineer would ever work for a non-engineer, like an MBA or something like that. And so I had engineering over on one side of the company, and I just ran that a certain way, and then we had the rest of the company over there running that separately. But as we got a series of broad products, that became extremely unwieldy, and we undid it. And because I'd inculcated this religion in everybody, at first they thought, well, Bill, you told us this won't work. How can you do this? And I said, I don't know. Let's just try it. And of course, it worked brilliantly. Now, most of our business units today, and we have over 50 business units, most of them are run by non-technical people. Out of about 50, I think 10 are run by engineers. Now, if I can get an engineer who knows business, that is somebody who knows both, I'll take that any day. The world is very short of people who combine an understanding of business and an understanding of engineering. That person is worth, assuming you have other qualities like you like to work, that person is worth a great deal. But there aren't enough of those, and so most of our business units are run by people who had a classic undergraduate education, went out in the workforce for a few years, came back, got an MBA degree, and then started in a marketing type position. And we can tell very early on the marketing people who, even though they're non-technical, they're getting to be friends with the engineers. They're kind of asking the engineers to explain a few things to them. They never look at the source code or anything hardcore like that, but they're very interested in the trade-offs. And they make friends with those engineers, so they have a certain rapport and they can talk to them. And when tough decisions have to be made, like cutting a feature or delaying the schedule, they have a way of communicating that so that the morale in that group can work very, very well. We allowed the company as it grew to get very large functional groups, like the engineering group I mentioned. And it was 6 years ago now when we went to this business unit concept. And that is to have the smallest groups possible focus in on a product. The ideal size for a business unit is about 200 people. 200 people, everybody can know everyone else. We can rent a movie theater and you can all go to a movie together. You can have a party and walk around and still know who everyone is. And when I say 200, I mean all the skill groups. A business unit has engineering, testing, user education, which is writing the documentation and help, a thing we call program management, which is a sort of a technical thing of writing the spec, but you don't write any code, and all the marketing people are all in that one group. And so, for example, the group that creates our Excel product is 170 people. And it's actually an ideal business unit. Inside the company, of course, to spread our good practices, everybody has an awareness, and we really reinforce the awareness of which business units have led the way in doing things right. And our Excel business unit has been, throughout its history, one of the best at doing new things, keeping its product up to date, having incredible competitive focus. And so that's good size. Smaller than that, of course, works very well also. Small is beautiful, particularly in development. When I first started the company, I sort of thought you could have 3 or 4 people work on the same task. Today, we've actually come up with tools where we can have 40 engineers working on the same task and still get some productivity. Now, you don't get anywhere nearly 40 times what you would get of one great engineer. But then again, you can't do it that way because time matters a great deal. People sometimes come and ask us, well, aren't you going to move all your engineering to India someday and save a bunch of money? Well, the answer is that doesn't really matter. We're in a business of making hits, hit software products. To write a software product, like a new version of Windows, will cost us about $20 million. And of course, when we sell it, we have very low marginal cost. Our cost of goods sold when we sell something is around 15 or 16%. And so, if you look at the equation of volume, times price, minus cost of goods, minus fixed R&D, the big number in this equation, well, there's 2 big numbers. Volume and price are the 2 numbers that drive everything. And so if you can get volume, that's it. Now, let me tell you a little bit about volume in our business. Now, let's talk about word processing. Very competitive business. Actually, this is the only country where we don't have majority market share in word processing, although very soon we will have that. Seriously, we're hardcore. If you have a product that starts to sell very well, the beauty of that is you have people telling other people, hey, this is a great product, you ought to try it. So when you have a naive friend who wants to buy a computer, he knows he's going to have some questions. He's going to buy the same product that his friend bought. That's the one the friend can answer the questions about. And if you have a group of users, like a law firm, they're moving documents around. And sure, you have these conversion programs, but it's 100 times easier if you all use the same word processor. And then you get law firms exchanging with each other. And then you get law firms exchanging with business firms. And so, in a sense, success breeds success. And within any one generation of software, once somebody gets a high share, if they manage their business well, within that generation of software, they should have a very, very high profit share. And so our business is like most businesses in the world. The guy with the #1 market share makes most of the profits. Our business is so extreme that sometimes the #2 guy doesn't even make money. Other businesses can sustain sometimes 2 or 3 high market share manufacturers. And this is why you find people like Jack Welch, when he comes into GE, he basically goes to a business unit and says, look, can you be #1 or #2, or what can we sell this business for and just get rid of the thing? Because if you're always having to follow standards set by others, innovations set by others, you're always having to use prices as your primary tool. And that's no way to create a long-term sustainable business. Now, so if a company runs its business well, as I say, they can be very strong. In the history of software, well, let's go to about 1980. At this time, we had about 100 people, and IBM came to us and talked about doing a personal computer. Now, everybody talks about this as a critical event, and it sort of is and sort of isn't. I mean, there was nothing preordained that IBM would do a good job on their personal computer. It was the people they picked, one person in particular, and going to Intel, going to us, and getting a team approach. Just because they were successful in mainframes didn't mean they'd be successful in PCs. Because they did a decent PC, that's the one everybody chose to imitate. So IBM compatibility became sort of a rallying cry for the software industry to be able to share those fixed costs of development across all those different machines. And so the fact that happened, sort of once there was a good machine, it was going to be a standard. Well, we were very busy as a company, and we hadn't had time to develop lots of applications. We had one called Multiplan, which is a spreadsheet. Not many people remember Multiplan. And the competitor, there was a company called VisiCalc. VisiCorp had VisiCalc, and it was the dominant spreadsheet, just absolutely dominant, like 90% market share. And so we thought, oh, we'll make Multiplan, which will be better. Well, I mistakenly told our groups, target the Apple II, which was this fairly limited computer, 64K of memory, 8-bit type computer. And so we struggled to squeeze Multiplan into this thing. Well, then Lotus came along, a guy named Mitch Kapoor, very, very creative guy, and did a spreadsheet that focused only on the IBM platform. And he actually took all the good ideas in Multiplan he put into 1, 2, 3. And he came up with a number of additional ideas and got into a very dominant position with that spreadsheet. You know, Multiplan basically disappeared. There's a little bit of a lesson here. Lotus, they did 1, 2, 3, and it was so successful they thought they couldn't do anything wrong. So they came up with another product called Symphony. And because Symphony was going to be so great, they never localized 1, 2, 3 into French or German or Dutch or other languages like that. Not never. They thought they were never going to. And so they just kept putting that off because they were just going to have Symphony. So actually, because we localized Multiplan in those languages and really gained share and gained relationships, Multiplan withstood many, many years of competition with Lotus in specific overseas markets. Although in the US, because 1, 2, 3 was in English, it was wiped out pretty quickly. And so it shows the kind of nonlinear situation you're in. A market share less than about 40% is not a sustainable market share in our business. So anyway, Symphony was not very successful. And the next turn of the crank was the graphical interface. And surprisingly, whether it was Macintosh or Windows, people didn't notice that, and that became the new generation. And a great source of Microsoft's success was that we really bet, did something very risky. We bet on Windows, and that paid off. We bet the entire company. I mean, we stopped doing development for DOS in 1983. And it wasn't until 1990 that it was clear we had made the right decision. I mean, and we were very open about what we were doing, and yet people in the industry said that we were crazy. So great success comes from taking pretty incredible risks. Today we're engaged in another risky thing, which is this so-called information superhighway. We're betting on that our software will be at the center of that, but I'll talk about that more later. Now, in terms of management practices that make a company successful, I'm always a little leery that there's these grand, single sentence principles that you can take from one business and apply to every business in the world. Like I said, in our business, cutting the cost of developing the software, that fixed cost, cutting it down, even if you could cut it to 0, if it made your product 10% worse or 2 months later, it would be a very poor thing to do, because just that little difference of quality and time could make the difference whether your product gains the critical mass and gets that large market share, or whether some other product comes in and is able to do that. So for our business, it's an intellectual property business. Being lavish in the sense of hiring the very smartest people to do the product work, and being willing to not only spend more on them, but more on resources to make them efficient is a very, very good idea. If you go to Microsoft, it looks very strange. It looks like a campus. It's 300 acres of trees with these 2-story buildings, and everybody has individual offices that they sit and work in, and they can do whatever they want in the office, put funny things up in there and personalize the environment. And that's because of this view of what it means to have that 10% extra enthusiasm, or the desire to stay 10% longer every day in a nice environment and get something more done. But I will, although it's dangerous, talk about some general principles that I think apply to a lot of businesses that have certainly worked for us. The small business units is a fundamental one. Now, there's a trade-off here. That's the thing a lot of these business guys who say things They never talk about the trade-offs. All of these things are trade-offs. Like, how do you organize your company? Do you organize it by product or geography or customer? Those are trade-offs, and believe me, that's one where different businesses should do it in different ways. Even different phases of times in industries argue for different organizations in terms of what is really critical to innovate in during that time. In our case, we have a dual structure. We have the product business units and we have the geographic business units. And we create P&Ls for both of those. The geographies, like our subsidiary here, view the product group as a 23% overhead. And I think, geez, we've got to pay 23% and still make money. I hope those development guys give us some good products. Likewise, the product group sees the sales channel as about a 26% overhead. And so they're saying, boy, those sales guys sure cost a lot of money. I hope they actually sell some of these wonderful products that we're able to give to them. And a dual system like that wouldn't work in many companies because it's very complex to do the forecasting, to get the trade-off, to focus on new products. A key reason why we can do it is that we use very modern information tools, starting with electronic mail. Electronic mail is such an obvious thing, but unless a company has all of its executives using electronic mail and reading it, say, several times a day, then it's worthless to have. If you have to send communication in any other way, then you're going to get zero benefit out of having the system. And so it actually has to be mandated from the top. I get several hundred messages a day, product status, what's going on. I'm able to send messages out worldwide, talking about what I'm thinking, what's important, and many decisions can be made on email. Now, some decisions are so complex, you have to say on electronic mail, oh, let's get together and talk about this. But at least before you go, you can send around the information. So you never have meetings where you're just sitting there listening to somebody explain something and say, wow, I didn't know that before I came to this meeting. Now I have to think about it and we have to decide all at the same time. That's very rare. And it can bring the company together and make it a lot smaller. So that's a very key tool. Another trade-off we get is that these business units can be too independent. Let's say they all invented their own user interface. And so when you used Microsoft Excel, it was completely different than Microsoft Word. That would look crazy. You'd say to me, it's like two different companies in there. Well, we're trying to get the benefit of two different companies, and yet we still have to have some consistency of sales policies, technology sharing, user interface sharing. And so what we've done is we have two people who can overrule a business group. That is, a business group decides what they want to do for their competitors. They get up every morning, they memorize everything about their competitors. I have this rule that they're supposed to know where their competitor went to school, how old their kids are, when their kids' birthdays are. It's kind of a joke in a way, but it's actually very serious. It used to be very hard with WordPerfect because all the managers there had like 8 and 10 kids. But they just hired this Dutch guy, and now it's not as hard. He's very good, but he doesn't have a large family. So we have, if you had a lot of committees that when a business unit wanted to do something, it said, okay, but you got to go to this user interface review committee, and you got to go to this technical architecture committee, you've got to go to the pricing subcommittee, then you might as well not pretend you have business units. I mean, that's just a bunch of meetings and a bunch of disagreement, and no clear way to resolve trade-offs of, a business unit has a reason they want to do it one way, and the consistency group has a way they want to do it the other way. What are they supposed to do? Just they like each other, but what's the process? So we don't have any of those committees. We have myself and one other person who are the only people who set out in advance the set of guidelines, policies that a business unit has to follow. I was very interested to read, there's this Sloan book called My Years with General Motors, and it's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, I mean, it's a great business management book. And he always talks about, because General Motors was really the first large, well-managed company. And there were different divisions doing different things, and he wanted to come up with coordinated policies. So he was the first one to really think about what's policy and what's implementation, and how do you separate that out in a way that empowers people? And he made that work very well. Well, here we have two people who have to write, the other guy's Mike Maples. He and I write a memo in advance saying what all the guidelines are. And so they're very explicit. And then people come to us with their plan. Every year we do what's called a 3-year review, but we do it every year. So you look out 3 years in terms of what the plan is. And you compare it to the previous plan. And they run that by us. And as soon as they've done that, if we don't object, that's it. Nobody's going to call them up and say, but what about this? And so in a way, it makes those two jobs very, very hard. And sometimes we miss opportunities. Sometimes we could have shared more code, we could have shared more user interface, but we've made that decision. We don't tear our hair out and say, oh, you guys blew it. We knew that our system was going to miss some of those opportunities to optimize, focus on the competitor in that small business unit feeling. Now we're getting to a size now where we have so many business units that we may have to create another level. Where some of our marketing messages get integrated. We may have to take the 50 business units and put them in 5 divisions. It's a pure matter of size. If we could avoid it, we would. And we're even still trying to figure out how to do it without sort of disempowering the marketing people in the individual business units to think that they have to get a review with this next level up. Another thing we've always done is we're very careful in terms of adding people. And what that does is it makes you think hard about what's important. And it also makes the jobs very big jobs. I mean, who wants to start and be, the assistant to the assistant for this product that reports to this committee? How can you get a good person to take that job? How after they take that job can that be fun? If you don't have people within a few months of hiring them actually making decisions that make big difference, multi-million-dollar differences about a product, how it's marketed, what you do, then you don't deserve to be hiring the smart people. Let another company like us hire those people because we need them. And we are in our hiring, I'd have to say, very picky. If people don't think computers are interesting, if they don't want to use them as a tool, that's fine. But if you want to work for our company, you have to have a certain level of enthusiasm, a certain level of involvement. Not technical involvement, but you have to believe in these tools and want to come up with a way to articulate that message. You have to be willing to work fairly hard. And we actually ask people that. Sometimes they think it's a strange question. And we want people who have shown they have excellence. Our interviewing system is fairly grueling because what happens is if you have a day of interviewing at Microsoft, as you go from place to place, the first person who interviewed you sends electronic mail to the next person and says, hey, they're a little weak on this. Really probe hard on that. Or as the day goes on, if somebody's very good, then the electronic mail will read, hey, this person's good. Don't waste time about the buying exercise. That is this somebody we want to hire? Focus your time on the selling exercise. That is making sure this person comes to work for us. And then at the end of the day, if it's a really hard selling situation, they'll pull in one of the top executives, sometimes myself, to sit down and talk to the person. And we offer the job on the spot. People when they fly in from undergraduate or MBA schools don't expect that. And they don't accept necessarily on the spot. We don't put any pressure to do that. But it's like, hey, you were here today and we like you. Those other companies, they interviewed you, they're still thinking about it. But we had no doubt, We handed you the offer letter right then. And, once you get that offer, not 2 days will go by without somebody who interviewed you calling you up and saying, hey, what do you think? Geez, what are your issues? What can we do? Because hiring good people, it pays off so well in the long run. And so you really want to be careful how you do that. We mostly hire people right out of school. 70% of our hires go that way. It just works best. You get people who have new ideas, who are open-minded to learn a certain way of doing things. When we have a major hole in senior management, we will go outside the company. In fact, if you look at the Microsoft executive staff, that's the vice presidents, who are sort of the level below me. There's about 20 of them. It's almost equally split now of people that I hired who came in with extensive business experience in other companies versus people who were like me and sort of learned on the job as we went. And there was never a divide between the young people who knew nothing and then the business types. We were always learning from them. We had immense respect for them. I had a president for 7 years who came from a company called Tandy Radio Shack, who really shaped a lot of our business processes. And all of us, including myself, learned an immense amount from having that person in. So when we do bring in people from the outside, we bring them in with the right kind of experience, and then we really let them do a senior job. We really try and learn from them and put a lot of effort into that. We have used stock options as a key incentive tool. We have, bonus program, and but the key long-term thing that sort of says that this is a company that, we're all in this together, and we have a lot of potential, is the stock option. We have been more generous with stock options than any company that I'm aware of. In fact, we calculated a few months ago that there's 2,000 people who've made more than $1 million working at the company. And that includes, if you started 6 years ago with an MBA, and you didn't, as your options vested, if you were smart enough not to sell them, you'd have a couple $1 million. Now, actually, I didn't expect the options to be worth that much. We might have handed out maybe half as much if we really thought it was going to be like that. But it is a very powerful tool. They have a 4.5-year vesting period, so you get a certain number of shares, and then it's sort of every 6 months you get another 1/8 of the shares become yours, so that even if you leave, you get to keep those. And it works very well when the company's on a growth path and going up. Now our stock has been plateaued for about a year or so. We feel we have incredible potential, but you have to make sure people understand how that valuation model works. And our stock is a little bit volatile because we're a high-tech stock. It works a certain way. And we also have a very high valuation. Microsoft today, its valuation is about $25 billion. And it's another one of these things where, every time it goes up, I think, my God, how did that happen? We are about the 20th most valuable company in America. That is total valuation. We're more valuable than General Motors. We're more valuable than IBM. And it's, when you say, boy, can we double it? Can we be worth $50 billion? The answer is yes, we can do that. It's not trivial. We're going to have to hire a lot of good people. We're going to have to maintain a strong edge. Our vision that the computer becomes a widespread information tool will have to come true. But I believe we can do that. And having done that, we will be one of the 10 most valuable companies in the world, because this is a very stratospheric level that, now you're talking about AT&T, Exxon, General Electric, very, very few companies up at that level. Just a last thing to talk about, and then we'll do questions. Why do I think there's so much growth here? Well, I think the original vision holds true, that everyone will want one of these devices. If I had to amend the statement today, instead of saying on every desk and in every home, I would say on every desk and in every home and in every pocket and in every car and a bunch of other places too. In every airplane seat, in every hotel room. We think intelligent communications devices, which is what the PC will evolve into, will be essentially the replacement for today's phone system. And that's the information superhighway. I hate the term superhighway. It implies that the government's got to build it. It implies that it relates to everybody sort of in a traffic jam going the same place. whereas it's quite the opposite of that. It's everybody doing whatever they want, looking up the information they're interested in. Even if no one else wants to watch a certain movie, you can sit there and do it. If a very small group wants to get together and find something out, you can collaborate. The ability to find people you've never met who have common opinions, who want to travel the same place, to find out what jobs are available, about buying real estate. You want to watch movies? Well, you can look at the reviews. You can find out what your friends have watched. The system can recommend you based on what you liked before, what you might want to see. Anybody who wants to let the system publish what they watch, you can see what movies I'm watching, because I'll check the box that says, yeah, people, I don't view that as a deep secret that I have. And so it's a very rich system. If you believe in capitalism, what this does is it takes the idea of a market mechanism, that is the matching of buyers and sellers, which today markets are imperfect. There's a friction cost of finding each other and concluding transactions. It takes that friction cost down to near zero. And so even things that you wouldn't think of as markets, like how do you pick a lawyer, how do you find a consultant, if somebody doesn't want to work full-time and they're available to work out of their house, how would they possibly advertise their skill set and make sure that they get matched up with the right job? Well, the world is a very inefficient place because that doesn't work in the right way. Today it's all anecdotal. Oh, did you hear that someone knows someone who did something, who could do something? Well, maybe. And that isn't the way markets ought to work, and it's not the way they will. These transformations will happen first in business. Telecommuting, video conferencing, collaborating by sharing information. That'll be a reality within 3 or 4 years. The PC 2 years from now will have the video conferencing built into it. The home market, which is the holy grail, the big opportunity, that'll happen too, but there's regulatory issues. It's very expensive. We've got to improve the user interface. There's a lot of work to do, and our company is doing pilots during 1995 where we'll go out to thousands of people and come up with a broad range of applications that we think make sense. And so companies that understand these tools and where they're going, they can re-engineer their processes to be so much more efficient. You know, we do our budgeting process very efficiently because we do it electronically. I can take my computer I carry around and look at, you know, when I come here, I look, oh, how are their sales doing? What are they behind them? What are they ahead on? Just on the plane coming in, and I'm just completely up to date and know what to ask about. When we're doing charitable donations, you just get this nice electronic form on your computer screen. If you can say, you can check and say, no, I'm not a nice guy, I won't give anything, or you can say, yes, I'll let the company allocation committee decide what things I give to. I'll just give my fair share. You can click that, or you can go in and look at all the charities and what they do and how they spend money. So it's a rich interactive exchange, not a piece of paper involved. You know, we today insist that when people order products from us, they do it electronically. So there's so much overhead in companies, so many things that reduce how decisions can be done well, things that really disempower people. Like when you have a product that sells through retail, we have these superstores that sell a lot of the products. We just want to hook that superstore cash register up directly to our computer. We don't want people in the middle trying to think about those numbers, because it's all just a waste of money and its value subtracted for them to do it. And eventually they're going to figure out those are not very good jobs because all they do is slow down the system from working the right way. So there are incredible opportunities. I think we'll see these things unfold in the not too distant future. And my view is that they will make society as a whole richer. They will make your jobs interesting, and they'll keep my job very interesting. And that's why I think I have the best job in the world. Thank you. So we'll do
Mr. Gates, we have no doubt we hire you. Mr. Gates is willing to answer a few of your questions. Who will take the floor? There are 5 microphones. Please use them. Who will be the first one? Yeah. And perhaps other ones can already line up, then we can have an overview.
Can you hear me? My name is David Brons, and my question is, what do you think about CDI? And is Microsoft going to develop software for that?
You know, it's been a couple of years since I remembered about CDI. About 4 years ago, that must have been 5 years ago, I was involved with Philips trying to convince them to use the same processor that's in the PC, the Intel processor. And I know CDI is out there, but it's not very visible today. And so in terms of our own development, no, we are focused on the PC and the Macintosh, and we're doing lots and lots of CD-ROM software titles for those machines. And we might even do some for like Sega, because that's a very high volume platform, but that's our focus.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is...
would you mind to give first the floor to it? Yes? Okay. Fine, thank you.
My name is Gijs Vlas, and it's close to CDI but not the same. What's the vision of Microsoft in the home market on interactive television?
Well, in the home, as this high-speed connectivity gets built out, you'll have different types of devices. You'll certainly have a device that you sit, say, a half a meter away from, that has a keyboard, and that has a screen that has high resolution. So you can put a lot of text on it. You might be able to store things locally or print things. You might have that in your den. Your kids will use it for homework. You'll use it for your home banking. You'll use it to leave messages and browse messages. That device is the PC. It's the PC of the future. Now, if you go to another part of the house, you might have a big screen that you sit 3 meters away from and use a little infrared control. Now, the text doesn't come out as nice on that screen. That's the future TV. In fact, the electronics and the software architecture in both of those will be identical. And so whoever succeeds to define the software standards for the highway will be somebody who works on both of those. They'll either overthrow the PC standards, or the PC standards will move down into what's called the set-top box for that kind of thing. Now, no one knows who's going to succeed at this. I mean, today, who has the big software bases? In the games world, it's Nintendo, Sega, and in the PC world, it's Macintosh and Windows. You know, we think, anyway, we think Windows will play a big role, and we have a way of working with Sega to also connect their system into what we're doing. So it's a very competitive situation.
You on the left.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gates, is there a chance that the major improvement of efficiency in the business world will eventually lead to mass unemployment, or at least a bigger unemployment we see right now?
Okay, this is a point about economics. There is an infinite demand for jobs out there. Until, you know, classes are very small, so people are taught in the most individual, perfect way, until every old person is being taken care of in the best possible way, until the streets are perfectly clean. I mean, society has an infinite need for people to be trained, to go out and do things that can make life better for us. And this notion that unemployment has something to do with lack of demand is a very bothersome thing. I mean, economics, basic economics, should be a required subject for any voter. That's my opinion. And the fact that these labor markets have been set up in a way that they don't self-adjust because of employment payment, because of wage rigidity, things like that, it's very unfortunate. And you know, people are going to have to think real hard about changing taxation structures, changing training incentives, changing unemployment incentives, in order to get their labor markets back into a reasonable thing where all these wonderful resources of these employed people are employed in all these wonderfully important things that need to be done. But technology, thank goodness, well, at least it'll help people understand where those unemployed people are and where those needs are, and maybe even help these people who've set up these market distorting policies figure out, oh, hey, you're supposed to do things a little bit differently. So it's like saying, you know, when the tractor was invented, oh, there won't be enough jobs, we don't all get to dig ditches. Well, the computer is taking away the crummy jobs, and there's plenty of great jobs where you work with people and help make the world a better place that at the right type of structure will direct people towards those jobs.
Thank you very much.
I'm getting enthusiastic for politics again. To the right.
My name is Peter Houtsagers. I'm from Sion in the Netherlands. We are in the market of the very small computers. Bill, what is your view of the development in these markets, and does Microsoft consider in the future making software for these kind of very small platforms?
How small do you mean?
To put it in your pocket,
Okay,
pocketable.
right. Yeah, they're going to be small computers. We believe in what we call the wallet PC, which is a little device you'll carry around in your pocket. That'll connect up through wireless connectivity, so you can get mail messages, you can talk to it and do voice communications. It'll have a what's called a global positioning sensor, so it'll know where you are, show you a map. The world slowly but surely will convert to digital certificates. So instead of having paper money or paper tickets or metal keys to open things, your wallet PC will have essentially digital authentication to replace all of those things. We call it a wallet PC because it replaces everything in your wallet. In fact, you can have thousands of pictures of your kids or your house or whatever it is you like to bore people with. It'll all be there in a deep multimedia fashion. So there's a huge potential for this market. Now today the market is no one knows what the right taxonomy is. You know, Sharp computers or Newtons. Is it a PDA, a personal communicator, a mobile companion? We're working on both what we call personal communicator, which is a smart cellular phone with a little bit of a screen, and we're working on what we call a WinPad mobile communicator, which is a subset of Windows running on a small device you can carry around. We are one of dozens of companies that are working in this area. Now we'll provide more affinity to Windows, more compatibility, but it's a category, it's a very important category that deserves a lot of investment.
We are running out of time. Last question, and if you don't mind, the female student has the floor, for we do have a mixed student population.
Mr. Gates, my name is Gisela Rust, and I'm currently involved in the MBA program at Nyenrode. And I have a question with regard to your multimedia software. Can you give us some more information on Tiger, your prototype multimedia software for business, please?
Okay. Well, I'll try and avoid getting too technical. One of the applications for this information superhighway is that you can watch any movie whenever you want. It's a full two-way system using fiber optics and this magical technology called asynchronous transfer mode, ATM. Well, when people are watching movies, they insist that the movie, it's just like a voice conversation. You hate it when it's interrupted. You want a continuous stream of video. And computers today don't work that way. They kind of send messages around their packets, and if they're kind of late, it's okay, because it's not a real-time thing. But voice and video are very real-time. And so getting a computer so you can have 10,000 movies and 10,000 people who can watch those movies and connect it all in the right way, that's a tough problem. Now, different companies, when they look at that problem, go back to their cultural roots. IBM looked at that problem and said, finally, a mainframe problem. A guy named Larry Ellison, who works at Oracle and owns 95% of a supercomputer company, said, aha, finally something to do with a supercomputer. And Microsoft, in its classic way, said, hey, this is a software problem. And so we use standard PCs to do this video server thing. And it's very, very cheap. It's very superior. And anyway, in the trials that we have in 1995, we'll be using this as one of the components. And the components in this are very deep components, because to have security, to have it work with millions of people, it's more complicated than today's international phone network. The kind of demands, capacity balancing, error handling, reliability that you have to have. So it's a major software feat, and that's why that we're spending the $100 million a year.
Mr. Gates, on behalf of the audience, on behalf of the universities, thank you so much. We are delighted to have you on our International Advisory Board. You are an outstanding businessman, an example for our students, and I can absolutely assure you, you will be proud of that university that you were addressing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.